Well, as more people continue to join, I will welcome all those who are here tonight. Welcome, and thank you for joining Women's Way for closing the gender wealth gap forum, saving the early childhood education sector. I'm Diane Corman-Levy, the Executive Director of Women's Way, and I'm delighted that you all decided to spend the next hour with us. By choosing to be with us when I know you're invited to so many meetings and so many events, you are choosing to join the movement to strengthen the ECE sector and improve gender economic equity for all women. Today's forum is part of a year-long series whose purpose is to educate different stakeholders about the drivers of the gender wealth gap and actionable steps each of us can take to help close the gender wealth gap. Today's session focuses on saving the early childhood education sector and why the ECE sector is so important to the economic security of women and their families. You will hear from three amazing speakers who will address the issue from a policy and workforce perspective. You will also have opportunities to ask questions to the speakers via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So I strongly encourage you to submit your questions, and I will do my best to address as many of your questions as possible. The chat is disabled, but we will pop in links and resources that you can view. We are also recording this session, and we'll make it available for you to view again if you want to see it twice, and for those who could not attend today's session. So before I introduce our amazing three panelists, I would like to spend the next 10 minutes providing an overview of the economic state of women and children, and why Women's Way is investing its resources into addressing the gender wealth gap. So I'm going to share some slides. Can everyone see the slides? I just lost it. Sorry, let me start over. Okay. I hope everyone can see the slides. So again, welcome to closing the gender wealth gap. Just briefly, Women's Way has been around for about 43 years, and we're the leading nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of women, girls, and gender equity. And we're the first umbrella funding federation in the United States specifically dedicated to women's issues. So we've been dealing with women's issues for 43 years, and one of them has been advancing the economic security of women. So what is the economic state of women? I think you all have been hearing a lot about this, particularly in the midst of this pandemic that we are experiencing. But before COVID-19, nationally, women and children were 73% of the poor. Philadelphia had the highest poverty rate of just above them among 10 largest cities, about 25%. And the region's largest demographic group living in poverty are women ages 25 to 34. And 37% of the children were poor. So we know when women are poor, children are poor. So what's happened since COVID-19? Unfortunately, not good news for women. Nationally, women's unemployment rate rose by 12.8%, 2.9 percentage points larger than men's increase of 9.9%. In September, 1 million Americans dropped out of the workforce, and 80% were women. This is not a good thing for the current and future economic security of women. And part of this gender difference is explained by the disproportionate impact it had on jobs and occupations that tend to employ more women. Women account for 74% of employment in high contact occupations such as restaurants, tourism, retail, and personnel services. An even more important factor is childcare. 32% of the US workforce have a child under the age of 14 at home. And the continuing closure of schools and daycare centers have greatly increased parents' childcare needs and reduced their ability to work. Now, the increase in childcare needs affects women more than men because 21% of children in the United States live with a single mother, while 5% of children live with a single father. As of August, 55% of PA workers receiving unemployment assistance were women. And Philadelphia's unemployment rate increased from 5.9 to 15.4%, majority of whom are women. So why build wealth of women? Well, we know the gender wage gap is real and affects a woman's ability to invest income into her children and her own future. Wages are part of building wealth, which is the foundation of financial health. Without wealth, financial shocks such as illness, unemployment, and the pandemic can destroy a woman's economic security. So assets, which are both financial and non-financial, help women remain stable through financial emergencies. So we're seeing that many women don't have assets, and that's why they're struggling significantly during this pandemic. It enables them to live with housing security, improve children's opportunities, take risks that result in better jobs or business startups, pursue higher education for themselves and their children, maintain good health, retire securely, pass on security to the next generation, and participate and shape political and social agendas. So it has this ripple effect when we invest in women's health and wealth. So investing in women's wealth advances our region and our nation. Women, before the pandemic, comprised more than half of all workers in the United States. It has now shifted because of so many women dropping out of the workforce. And at the same time, nearly half of mothers are the primary breadwinner for their families. So we rely on the wealth and health of families to be able to take care of their children. And the fastest growing businesses in the United States are owned by women of color. So if we want to support women-owned businesses and small business development, we need to invest in women. Another important fact is that parental assets are the strongest predictors of children attending and graduating from college. So if we want to invest in the education of our children, we need to invest in the wealth of the mothers. And finally, closing the gender wealth gap would add nearly $500 billion to the nation's gross domestic product. It's good for everyone. It's good for our country. We call it the woman effect. It's good for our children, communities, cities, states, country. But what is the gender wealth gap? Now, this has probably gotten worse since the pandemic, but before the pandemic, single white women at median owned 32 cents on the dollar compared to single white men. Black and Latino women own less than a penny. And this has not improved for the past 50 years. And this is not about because women are less capable. It's about systemic policies and practices that have denied women access to accelerators to build assets and wealth. Some of the causes: women earn less than men. We hear this, we know this, there's many reasons for that. They are more likely to deny mortgages, and if they do get a mortgage, it tends to be overcharged, even though women historically are better at paying back debt than men. They are more vulnerable to predatory lending, and they hold more debt, including 2/3 of all student debt. So another fact is women are getting educated more than men, but they have no debt. And they provide the majority of unpaid caregiving. So Women's Way, we are taking this very seriously, this gender wealth gap. So we started something called the Women's Economic Security Initiative 3 years ago to build long-term systems-level collaborative initiative centered around the shared vision that all women in the Philadelphia region attain financial well-being for themselves and their families. And again, this is building not just better income, but building assets and wealth. So this requires a long-term vision, long-term strategies, long-term investment. We're fostering systems-level learning and change among our partners, and we're working to break down silos across organizations and sectors, all of them who are contributing to the gender wealth gap, but also will help solve to close it. So our network currently has 74 active WESI members, representing 49 organizations spanning for-profit, nonprofit, philanthropic, and public sectors. And what's really critical to our work is we center the voices, perspectives, and experiences of women with lived experiences of economic insecurity. They are at the table co-creating, co-designing strategies and solutions. We are now transitioning the West into the Gender Wealth Institute. We will have an official launching of this in January. And the mission is to be very clear, is to close the gender wealth gap in our region by advancing research and practical solutions that build wealth for women who are economically insecure. And as I mentioned before, women and girls with lived experiences are no longer passive recipients of programs and strategies that are designed by influencers like philanthropists, policymakers, and advocates who are very disconnected to the population and receiving services. They are not passive recipients in our models. They are actually playing the role of influencers and actors, as well as recipients. So they are co-creators in the research and development of practices. The Institute then brings structure and resources to this practice of co-creating and co-learning. It helps to produce quality data and new narratives that are centering the voices of women with lived experience. And all this is used to inform influencers, researchers, and other practitioners on new practices and tools for advancing economic security. So I now want to introduce these wonderful, amazing panelists that you're about to hear from that have an amazing experience and perspectives. So I first want to introduce Shannon Rudisill, who is the first executive director of the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, a group of national, regional, and local foundations committed to increasing the effectiveness of philanthropy in early childhood and elevating the importance of early childhood in policymaking. Shannon also served on the Obama administration's senior leadership team for early childhood programs, setting strategy for child care and Head Start, as well as programs jointly administered with the U.S. Department of Education, such as the Race to the Top, Early Learning Challenge, and the Preschool Development Grants. Carol Austin is the executive director of First Up, formerly the Delaware Valley Association for the Education of Young Children, known as DeBASE. First Up's a lot easier to remember, where she directs the fulfillment of the organization's mission to positively impact the educational and developmental outcomes for young children by empowering and equipping early childhood professionals and families with the schools and tools they need. Prior to joining First Up, Carol served as a senior leader where she worked for more than 15 years on high school education reform and youth post-secondary success. Sophia Ezomoghene is a lead early childhood literacy specialist for the Free Library of Philadelphia. She began her career in education as an AmeriCorps volunteer at an alternative high school serving older and underserved students. Later, she taught pre-kindergarten and kindergarten at a charter school in Washington, D.C. Before joining the Free Library of Philadelphia, she was a Head Start teacher for the school district of Philadelphia. So I welcome all of you, and I'm so excited to have you all here. So I'm going to start with a question for all three of you, and I'm going to start with asking Shannon, who actually is coming from a federal kind of policy level, and Carol's coming from more of a regional and state level, and Sophia is coming from this lived experience of being a teacher and working with teachers. So my first question is, what is the EC landscape, and why do we hear people say it's broken?
Thanks, Dan. It's fantastic to be with you. So when I think about this, I think one thing that's very important for people to have as context is the early care and education in our country. We have decided that even though this is a public good, we're going to provide it in the marketplace, which is a little different than what we do with other public goods like public education, K-12 education. So we basically have a diverse set of operators, nonprofits, for-profits, some public, and we have parents out there figuring out how to find it and pay for it on their own. So sometimes I ask people to do a thought experiment. If public schools went away and everybody at all income levels basically had to go and buy school for themselves, right? In a market that was totally driven by what people could afford to pay, what would schools look like? What would the teachers be getting paid if that was the situation, right? So that's sort of the situation we have in ECE, and sometimes it's a little easier to, think about like, oh wait, we don't do this for K-12. We don't do this for other schools. So because of that, we need to look at where is the money coming from, right? There's some public money, but it's totally inadequate to the job. If you look at how much money is spent by all people, parents, government subsidies, employers, we pay about $90 billion a year for ECE. Parents pay over half of that out of their own pockets. A little less than half comes from government, but that money is mostly concentrated for particular low-income families or families at particular risk. And even there, those federal funding sources or even public funding sources really fail to meet the need. So a couple quick examples. Head Start, which is a national treasure, has really narrow eligibility. It serves kids poverty and below. And even then, it depends exactly on how you count, but they serve roughly half the preschoolers below poverty. So they already set the eligibility low, and then the money only stretches far enough to meet a certain portion of that. Child care subsidies have eligibility that's about 200% of poverty, so about 2 times poverty, but there's only enough child care subsidy money to reach 1 in 5 of the eligible kids. So that really leaves the burden on parents to pay for it. And, you know, the result of that is families can't afford to pay what it costs. And I think folks might have heard the stat, you know, Child Care Aware of America looked at the average cost for 2 kids in 4 different regions around the United States. And it was the highest expense, child care was the highest expense above housing if you had 2 kids in every region except the West. And it was second to housing in the West. The same study found that the cost of care for 1 infant was higher than the cost of public college tuition in 28 states. And the other factor that I think is, that I would say is early educators are making poverty wages. They make about $12 an hour. About half receive some form of public assistance. Health insurance and paid sick days are pretty rare. You know, but I do think it's also important, and this will be my last point because I'm really interested to hear from the more local perspective. When we talk about $90 billion and we talk about parents having, you know, can't be able to afford it, and teachers making so little, I don't want to leave you with the impression that childcare operators or owners are getting rich. They're not, right? This is an expensive business. And actually most of those business owners are small businesses. Most of them are not chains. Y'all might think about chains. Those are valuable players in the market, but most of them are small businesses, and especially home-based businesses. Many women own, many women of color owned. And, you know, although they might technically be for profit, they have trouble making ends meet because this is just a, you know, a relatively expensive proposition. It's expensive to do it well, and we haven't devoted the public resources.
Thank you, Shannon. Carol, the same question. So what does the ECE landscape look like in Pennsylvania in our region, and why do we hear people say it's broken?
Yeah, great. And thanks for hosting this forum, Diane. Such an important issue overall. And, you know, in Pennsylvania, the child care workforce here is about 57,000 people, you know, small business owners, entrepreneurs, family child care providers, in addition to centers, center-based operations with teachers, administrators, et cetera. And of that, 97% of the workforce are women. Okay, somewhere around that very high number are women. And, you know, Pennsylvania has one of the lowest minimum wage rates in the country. We're still at, I think, 7.25% minimum wage. And even though, you know, we see in data that, yes, the average wage ranges anywhere between $10 an hour and something really in Pennsylvania is closer to $9.77 an hour. When you think about, you know, child care, which is categorized differently than educator or teacher is. So someone teaching toddlers, et cetera, which is really critical. So who can raise a family off of that? $9.77, the average statewide rate. Okay, you want to bear in mind that 46% or so of all Pennsylvania child care, you know, workers take some form of public assistance, whether that be food stamps or, you know, you name it. So, you know, here we are paying our most really valuable assets because these teachers and childcare workers are, you know, early childhood educators are working with children during the most important years of their life. You could make the case, the first 5 years, where we have the architecture for the brain being laid down. This is where they learn, this is where they grow, this is where so much happens that sets them up for entering kindergarten successfully and being successful. And here we have a situation where, you know, the teachers are really wrestling and struggling, you know, financially. And people who go into this business often do it because it's a mission. And though some may be for profit and some nonprofit, it's a mission for them. So it's not necessarily being operated like a business. So they take they're taking a loss every day. One of the things we know is, you know, there have been a variety of cost of care studies going around, and right now where we're landing is the cost for a child care, the yearly cost is somewhere around $16,000. That's the state average. Okay, there are some places where it's more. In the Southeast, is more expensive than most of the rest of the state, the southeastern part of Pennsylvania. So $16,000 or so, and at most, the reimbursement for an infant is about $11,000, and that's public money piece based on what people assume to be market rate. So, you know, you look at that, you know, you're thinking about taking a loss of about $5,000. And I could go on and on and on, because one of the things that we've seen recently during COVID is we have owners, we have directors going into their pockets to pay the electric bill and their insurance bills and to pay staff, but literally going into their pockets and going into, you know, credit card debt. A recent study from Penn State really showed that they're incurring credit card debt to keep programs alive. Okay, so there is just a lot in here, and that's on top of a system that was already, I'll say, buried. If you want to use the analogy of being underground, this was already underground, and now we have, you know, this pandemic, and we have people and teachers and women primarily, since we're talking about 97% women, going more into debt because they're really committed to the mission of providing high quality care for children, and that children have access to that.
Thank you, Carol. Such disturbing information, but really critical to how we talk about this issue and the impact it makes in so many lives.
Yeah.
So Sophia, you were a teacher, you work with teachers, so I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on the ECE landscape, and, you know, why is it broken, and what are some of the challenges that teachers are facing?
Yes, Diane, thank you for inviting me to speak today. So I guess one of the challenges for teachers is around being a qualified teacher, right? So in the ECE realm, we constantly talk about having highly qualified early child care programs, right? But a big part of that is having a highly qualified teacher. These are teachers who have gone through teacher training, who are continuing to receive professional development in the area of ECE to make sure that they're on top of the latest information to share and best practices in teaching in the classroom. Because of this big push in having highly qualified teachers, there's been a cause and an increase in state and federal requirements for ECE, which is a positive, which is something that we want, right? However, there hasn't been an increase in investing and maintaining affordable, and again, keyword here, affordable, highly qualified training and education opportunities for teachers, right? There has been either little to no increase or no increase at all in this area. So as a result, teachers who are pursuing higher degrees or certifications are not properly compensated for their work. As Shannon and Carol had mentioned before, the hourly wage here in Pennsylvania is $9.77 per hour, I believe Carol mentioned. Many of these teachers have a college degree, but obtaining these college degrees and then the teacher salary that follows, again, it doesn't add up. You end up going into student loan debt. I believe, Diane, you shared earlier. And for example, that's me. I have gone into student loan debt in pursuing these degrees in order to teach, right? But I needed those degrees, I needed those certificates in order to get my foot into the classroom. Along with that are benefits, as kind of Shannon touched on before. In my experience, I taught in the Head Start program here in Philadelphia and in a pre-K program in Washington, DC. Both programs were associated with the school district. So I had access to sick days and retirement benefits and health and dental. Unfortunately, other teachers who are working in center or home-based programs do not receive those benefits. And again, that's no fault to the owners. It's just like the money is not there to provide those sick days or those the health insurance. So it can be pretty costly in pursuing those degrees and pursuing those certificates to teach in a classroom. And but again, the salary is low. And as Carol had mentioned before, going into teaching is all about passion, right? We don't go into the education field for the money, but at the same time, we do need a high salary to pay like those bills, to pay that rent, to pay that mortgage.
So, then that's an interesting, I think, narrative people here in our country, that just advance your education and the money will follow, right? But what you're saying, Sophia, and what we're seeing a lot is there's a lot of women, and this is particularly true of women of color, that are getting more degrees than white men and having higher degrees, but yet they're still getting paid less. And it's not bridging that gap. And that previous data point I said, women have 2/3 of all student debt. So we can't just say go get an advanced degree and that will take care of your income and you'll eventually build wealth. That's not always true in this case because of grossly underfunding the ECE sector by the public sector. So my question is, to all of you, we all know that brain development is critical, right? From 0 to 3. We have the research that shows it. We all say we care about our children. We have family values. The future are our children. Yet we're grossly underfunding the ECE sector. So what are the barriers? What are the biases that are at play here that our government and our public institutions are not putting more money into this very important sector? Go ahead, Shannon.
So, I think that Sophia really put her finger on something that I've seen working in policy for 20 years, which is you can get bipartisan agreement and people to pass things that require more standards, higher degrees of qualifications, right? And then, money doesn't follow that. And I would say a couple of things. I think one is we should acknowledge that there is a racial wage gap. There's like some embedded racism in the system that I do think undercuts the investment because, even after you control for what degree folks have, African-American educators in ECE earn 78 cents less per hour than white early educators. So over the course of a year, it's $1,600 for a full year worker. And, there's some reasons for that. They're more likely to be assistant teachers, even if they have the same degree. They're more likely to teach babies and toddlers where we pay less, even though it's the hardest job. But I think that we had this session recently for our funders, and I was in a discussion group, and they talked about where have we normalized racism, and I would say also normalized sexism in this case. Where has it become so normalized we don't see it anymore? And I would say that this sector is a prime example of that. We have kind of this assumption that women, and especially women of color, are going to do this work, and they're going to do this work for very little pay, right? So it's like a societal assumption, which is why I think partially money never follows. And the other part of that goes along with that's kind of part A. The power dynamics are off, right? It's not organized. These are, the people who are involved as parents and as educators in the system have less political power in society. And we've been thinking about that a lot. And I would say one example that you could look to right now with COVID is around which industries are getting bailouts, right? Like we're talking about, bailouts for the airline industry, and not that they don't need it, not that I'm not worried about people who work for airlines, but, this industry undergirds all the other industries. And despite all of our advocates, all of, funders like my funders funding advocacy, funding people to try to get this message to Congress, it's not being funded. There's a power differential between the airline industry and this industry, right? So we can look, and it's partially about who's in it. And the last thing I'll say is you can look at what's going on between K-12 teachers and ECE teachers to see how much less power ECE teachers have, right? So in a lot of places, K-12 teachers are saying, this isn't safe. We're not coming back to work, right? We're going to wait until it's safe. And they have some power to do that. I think we've seen that, to keep themselves safe, right? To say it's partially unions and organizing. And, you know, in the ECE sector, people don't have health insurance. They're coming to work anyway because they don't have health insurance, and yet they're coming to work anyway. And yet they have no power to say, we're not coming. Like, we're not doing this. We're going to let, you know, unless you guys give us health insurance, we're not coming to work. And I think that you see it for families too, because as I was just on a different webinar, and, you know, one of the presenters pointed out, families aren't saying, we're worried second grade isn't going to be here next year if we don't go back now. But throughout the ECE sector, right, like teachers are like, well, if we don't show up, our place is going to go out of business and we'll have nothing for the parents because we don't have public investment to keep it going, right? So that power differential, and again, I just think it's a point of comparison to look at K-12 and ECE, where you can just see it right now, how it plays out. So I think that's honestly the driving factor that we don't talk about very much. We get all wonky and talk about other stuff, but I think that is the power difference is the thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Shannon. Here we have, you know, a women-dominated workforce, essentially, predominantly. So is it a wonder, right? Is it a wonder that that's the case? And childcare and early childhood education itself isn't organized in the way that a K-12 system is. There's, you know, we have nonprofits, we have for-profits, we have, you know, entrepreneurial enterprise, you know, and the genesis of it is pretty complicated. We've not known how to really think about this world. And it's only recently that we've really seen the research and data around, you know, brain development, early learning, that there's really been that shift. But, you know, you had part of the start of this, you know, with regard to, if you think about preschool, you know, middle-class families, you know, looking to ensure that, you know, their kids are educated. And then, you know, we had another part of this with, you know, welfare to work programs or other programs designed coming out of DHS to have women go to work. So, you know, there was some of it's a complicated genesis here. And though we have, you know, legislators and we always say it has great bipartisan support, it's interesting. People come at this from a different perspectives in terms of why there's this bipartisan support. Yeah, we need to, you know, we're a capitalist society. We need people to go to work. So sure, we'll support. Or is it really about the education of women and children? So it's just very fascinating, because you could still speak to legislators in parts of the state, quite frankly, who say, I don't really care about that. These women should be at home with their children. There's that conversation that still exists. So, you know, some of this is really being able to resolve for ourselves. This is a public good on many levels, and to fund it accordingly. Not leave this to the market, because the market cannot, parents cannot afford to pay the true cost of care as per the data that Shannon said. You know, in some states, it's the cost of college tuition.
Sophia, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, no, I completely agree. Going back to Shannon's point about the power dynamics between K through 12 versus birth to 5. Like, again, and being a former teacher, being in the classroom, they were applying for grants to get funds to purchase materials for my classroom. A lot of times it would only say for K to 12 teachers only may apply, right? They would always forget about like the birth to 5-year-olds. Like, I'm very important too. Like, you know, as we mentioned before, there's a lot of growth from birth to 5 there, right? They need a lot of support, and I need a lot of materials in order to aid in that growth, in order to aid in those literacy, math, and social emotional skills. So that's a great point about like still pushing others, whether it be legislators or even companies to provide those grants, provide those funding, those scholarships or whatnot, just, to that birth to 5 area. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There was one of the participants said many teachers leave the field when they get a degree in order to support their own families. And I heard that a lot when we were working with the ECE sector, when we did a financial coaching program, that a lot of women were like, well, I'm advancing my education, but I'm going to leave the field. And then you see this massive departure because they cannot afford to stay in the ECE sector. So how do we change the narrative around this topic? Some people are like, oh, they're just babysitters, How do we connect the dots more to say, this is an education issue for children at the most critical time of their brain development. It's a workforce issue. It's an economic issue, right? It's an equity issue. How do you start connecting the dots for people? Like, how do we change the narrative? Because I think part of the problem is the narrative, how we talk about this, right, in the past. So I know that's not an easy question. So if you have any ideas of how we can help to talk about this from those multiple perspectives. If you don't have a response, go ahead, Shannon.
Well, I mean, I think we have to get real about money. It looks like Carol is unmuting, so it looks like, we have to get real about money. I think that, we've had, I've talked to lobbyists, early care lobbyists in different states, not Pennsylvania, I'll say, or anybody in the Delaware Valley. And they said, one year we had every single state legislator join whatever they called it, the ECE caucus, the little kids caucus. They had a cute name. They all joined the caucus. They all came to our reception, and we thought, wow, we've really done it. We got every single legislator to sign up to be part of the little kids caucus. And the lobbyist said they got $0 new that year, right? And so I feel like we've taken our eye off the ball a little bit around the money, right? Like, I mean, every year we produce reports about how many governors talk about early care and education in the State address. Look, this many governors, right? But like, we didn't get the money. And so, I think the narrative, we have the pieces and the parts. We have return on investment, we have brain science, which Sophia has described really well, during this webinar. And so I think it's got to shift to being not just convincing. Convincing is good, but there's also got to be accountability for elected officials, right? Like that's, I think, been a missing piece.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Shannon. The name of the game is more money. Getting your CDA, your associate degree, bachelor's, it costs money. It's not cheap at all, right? And again, you need those things to be in the classroom. You end up taking out, as I mentioned before, loans, right, to pay for these things. And just getting personal, again, like I have taken out loans to pay for advanced degrees. And then going back to that, like that wealth issue, that gap. We talk a lot about how here in the United States and building wealth is purchasing a home, right? It can be hard for you to purchase a home if you have a lot of student debt, right? It can be hard for you to purchase a home if you are earning, $10 per hour. So it's, again, more money. That's what it is, just more money, more funding.
Yeah, I think that that was a tough question. I would say that, here in Pennsylvania, like Shannon, same here, the ECE caucus, probably the most active caucus, and everybody is, very gung-ho and excited. And we did, we have a couple of campaigns here in the state. We did increase investment. We did get, even a pot of the state stimulus money for early childhood education. The challenge is we're so in the hole that just adding additional money, even though we've got to change the whole structure of it. And I think to Cheryl and Sophia, to Shannon and Sophia's point before, we've got to change how we finance this. because the financing and the structure just doesn't work. And, you know, there are all kinds of bells and whistles you have to do for providers to get reimbursed. Okay, it depends on, you know, how much they charge. There's just so much different criteria. We need to move towards funding this as the public good it is. That really is the only way. And I think part of changing the narrative with that is we have individual families who tell stories and individual providers, but we need, like, you know, we need the story of this. We need families and parents to really be loud about this. And I think now is the time for that, because, you know, we see families are really conscious of this at this point. And I think we've got to really get those stories and the word out there and have people actually push for this needs to be funded like any other public good would be funded. Because that's the way to do it, not just, you know, add in increment and do it, because we in this field, we get thankful for, thank you. Thank you for a little bit more that you know, grateful, but it's not enough. And as we said, people are not getting rich out of this at all. They're barely paying their bills. So
you started talking about, particularly you, Carol, what we can do to strengthen the ECE sector with respect to policies, funding, advocacy. So, you know, we have people listening to all of you, right? Who obviously care about this issue. What are some concrete things people can do as individual citizens? And we have an election year, and a very important election year. And I would argue that we need to flip some seats so there are more women in our state, city, and federal government who care and understand these issues. But what are some just concrete things people can do, action steps they can take to help kind of support and strengthen the ECE sector?
Well, I will say that, as I mentioned before, we have, and it's Start Strong PA and Pre-K for PA, both campaigns here in the state of Pennsylvania. And, you know, they're national organizations, they NAEYC, National Association of Education for Young Children, and many others that, you know, Shannon could point to. But I think get involved with these advocacy efforts. Get involved with our advocacy efforts at First Up and with those campaigns. We're always speaking to legislators, and it really makes a difference for the legislator in that district to hear from people in their district. And as individuals, we have, I know, individual parents on this call, family members, grandparents on this call. So to be able to hear you from your perspective, we may have some teachers and owners on this call. Same thing, your perspective is valuable. Just letting them know that you care about this, that you care about this issue and why it matters to you. Being able to tell a story that matters to you and the unique, that will make a difference. So, and you know, inside of that, we're always making an ask. We have advocacy efforts. So if you are able to sign up for our newsletter and follow the campaign and echo whatever we put out and retweet or repost that information so that we can create a real groundswell here, it would make a difference.
And again,
and of course, yes, I was out yesterday with some childcare programs sending my Get Out the Vote cards for them to give to parents. Okay, with the list thinking how to vote, where to vote, all of the information, you know, on those cards that they can hand out so we can get out the vote.
Yeah, I remember Carol's organization is firstup.org, so if you just want to get on their website. Anything else, Shannon or Sophia, you want to add?
No, I think Carol covered it. I'll say one thing that a couple of colleagues and I have been thinking about is, you know, efforts to repeal the ACA, right? And like, how many people turned up to say to their legislator at all level, I have a pre-existing condition. I mean, some of them might have been participating in Marketplace, might have taken advantage of Medicaid expansion, but maybe not. Many people had a pre-existing condition, right? And so, you know, I got the impression they couldn't go anywhere without hearing about that, you know? And so I feel like we need a similar thing, you know, to Carol's point. Like, I feel like maybe there aren't town halls right now, but there are telephone town halls. You know, my congressman, you pick up the phone, he's like, press 1 to get popped into my telephone town hall, or, you know, you get state, you know, legislators might be doing town halls. I feel like if they heard people talking about this at every one of those, but it rarely comes up, rarely comes up.
So I have a question from one of the participants. What role can the private sector play in funding the industry? So there's a gap in the public sector, but what can the private sector do? What can philanthropy do? What can to help fund this industry?
I feel like that one might be for me. So I think I'm not sure if you're talking about philanthropy or business. Oh, somebody wants to answer this question live. I don't know how that works.
It could be both. I mean,
business. She's a business. Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, Pennsylvania has an extremely active business coalition, so you should join that. So Carol can tell you who that is and how that is and how you get in touch with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the U.S. Chamber has really rallied around this, which is really incredible to me. And so the Pennsylvania Chamber is active, and there's even a report on the U.S. Chamber website about the state of childcare and the impact of that on families and businesses, et cetera, in Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania Chamber is very active, and we have even the Delco and the Philly Chamber starting to really become more active in this issue and advocating for it, because people are really seeing the impacts on workforce. Right? Yeah, given the numbers that Diane shared, there's other data, 55%, of employees miss work because of childcare issues. This is really starting to impact business, which is a great thing. So it is prime time, and I think, look, there are business organizations that have, subsidized childcare programs, and I've heard of companies right now subsidizing childcare for some of their employees. And that all helps. I don't think it replaces what we're talking about in terms of this being funded as a public good, because you would only have those big Fortune 50 companies that can afford to do that. And a lot of the poorest people don't work in those kinds of organizations. But certainly there's lots of room for business to advocate. Look, if we could have the corporate community like really go in there and send this message, perhaps we might get some things done. So being able to, as individuals, to push your employer and, keep telling those stories there as well, and those business organizing groups, I think we can get some activity there.
So someone asked, where can we sign up to support PA efforts to publicly fund ECE?
www.startstrongpa.org. And I know that Imani has also put a number of resources I saw in the chat box for folk as well, which is great. Yes. And I think we have a slide there at the end where that's included, but that would be phenomenal. Now you can find out some more about that also on our website at firstup.org. Okay, we are part of a coalition of not just Philadelphia, but a statewide coalition, because all of this public policy and advocacy work we do around early childhood is at a state level. So we have partners all over the state of Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh and in the middle of the state and all around. And so this advocacy effort is combined. Okay, so we'll get you connected.
Yes, and we will send everyone a list of these resources and links. So after this session is over, so you'll have access to all that information as well. So I have time for probably one more question, and the question is, PA's origins of the child care system was simply to allow families to work while their children were in safe placements without focus on learning. So kind of that whole babysitting narrative, right? How do you think that has had an impact on the ECE system? Do you think that the shift to focus on learning and brain development has had the impact that it should?
I think that that's accurate, right? That was the start and the impetus. And I think, as I indicated earlier, it is only recently that, with the research that's been done, that there's been this awareness of, oh my goodness, there's, we're wasting valuable years and times and an opportunity to really make a difference. Has it had the impact that it should? No, because I say that if it had the impact it should, we would have a publicly funded, well-funded system. So the answer is no. But you know, there are any number of ways we can go with this, and I'm really seeing this time as an opportunity, and it's going to be up to us, you know, collectively and individually, to walk through that door and speak to those legislators and make this moment count. So no, it's not had, and you know, join us in helping it to have that kind of impact.
So I actually have time for another question, because there's some good ones popping up now. What country is doing this right in your opinion? Is there a model that we should point to, if you know of?
Oh, this is one of those things where many countries are doing better than we are. And we haven't talked about paid parental leave in here, but I think it's important to call that out too, because that's part of this continuum, and it would actually take a little pressure off the system if the youngest babies were staying home with their parents. And so, and we're at the very, very bottom on that. You know, people often look to Europe, right? Northern Europe. I mean, they do a particularly good job with this. And, you know, I think that there are many models. I would say the most interesting one I've heard lately, because of the communication crispness of it, the simplicity of it. I think to Carol's point, complexity has not been our friend in this field, but in British Columbia, they have a fascinating campaign. You can Google it. I actually think we really should look at it here. It's very simple. Underlying it, there was a lot of policy work. So it's not, I don't want to give the impression it's simple-minded, right? Very smart people put it together. But the campaign is around no parents are going to pay more than $10 a day. Actually, the poorest parents would be free, but they don't even go there because they're just trying to get the point across, right? Like, you know, no parent will pay more than $10 a day. And if I'm remembering correctly, no ECE worker, no educator will make less than $20 an hour, I think is what it is, right? And so it's very crisp. And, you know, British Columbia is working on a 10-year plan, I believe, to just hammer away at that. Everybody got together, they agreed on it. They agreed not to undercut each other's messages. And importantly, I feel like one of the things that you've heard us talk about is people in the sector all need to gather together toward public investment, right? And so we need to help everybody in the sector tell their story so that parents understand, they know, because they meet they know their teacher's not making anything. They also need to know that their provider, whoever owns it, is not getting rich, right? And the teachers acknowledge that the parents can't pay more. So we're in this kind of circular tripartite looking at each other thinking, what are we gonna do? We're all out of luck, right? And so, like, this way they do it with this $10 a day, no teacher's gonna make less than $20 an hour, is they kind of pull it all together in one message, right? So that it's all looking toward public investment instead of looking at each other and throwing up our hands. So that's one I'd encourage you to check out.
Thank you. So, you know, it's interesting, and I think part of the big elephant in the room is we have a pretty harsh capitalistic system in America. That is basically, and I'm going to say this, built on white supremacist principles and practices, white male supremacist principles and practices, and I think even this notion of the common good. And over the years, we've undermined our public institutions, and we see it happening now with our current leaders. It's like, how do we regain faith and trust, right, in our public institutions and our government again? And I think that's really critical, that we don't lose faith in this, right? Because it is for the public good. And the private market, this narrative that the private market is going to take care of everything, is a myth, and it's false. And I know it's about 4 minutes to 5, and there's actually a really interesting question. I don't know if we have, well, let me just pose it if we have time, if we don't have time. But this one said, do we think the biggest obstacle for organizing ECE providers and getting public focused on advocacy is that these are for-profit businesses versus nonprofits like most K-12 public and private schools? If so, what can be done to change the narrative? Are you experiencing this with people like, oh, these are for-profit businesses, you know, we don't need to put public money behind them? Is that, is it, you know, part of that, is that part of the challenge when we talk about this.
Carol, what do you hear in the legislature?
That actually isn't something that I really hear a lot about. You know, private investment does go into for-profit businesses. I use that word loosely because many are barely, well, like, as we've discussed, it doesn't matter whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. Their margins are what their margins are. So it isn't something that I've heard as an impediment. And I think, you know, if we shift this to public good, that would all, you know, that would shift as well. You know, we need to look up how the implementation of that, but it's not something that I've heard. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, Shannon.
No, I think that we revere small business in this country, theoretically, right? So we could try to think about how we turn that into an asset in a way. And I think in healthcare, right, like people make a lot of profit and they still get a lot of public dollars. So I hear it. I think it's worth considering, but I think that I would not advocate for that we need to wholesale overhaul our mixed delivery system. I think our mixed delivery system has a lot of benefits, you know, and so I think we try to figure out how we take advantage of our affinity for small businesses, our supposed affinity for women-owned and minority-owned businesses, and try to play it to our advantage.
Well, thank you. I'm going to share my screen one more time. And I just wanted to thank these amazing panelists for talking about a really critical issue to the health and well-being of our children, our families, to the economic state of our families, and frankly, our country. And I hope you learned some more from listening to this engaging discussion. And I would like to end with, you know, this is not just about listening and learning. I mean, it is part of that, but how do we take action? So learn, advocate, and invest. And we will be sending out a list of resources that you can learn more about this, about the ECE sector, and really even assess your own conceptions about early childhood education and learn more about the needs of working women and their families, and then advocate. And there are some, on this document we will be sending out to everyone, there are some committees and task force coalitions that, and Carol mentioned some that you can become a part of, but you don't even have to become part of a coalition. You can advocate as an individual citizen. If you are going to listen to candidates talk, ask questions. What are you going to do to strengthen the ECE sector? What are you going to do as a candidate, as an elected official? Ask those questions. I never hear them in the debates with our presidential candidates. We don't ask those questions. We need to start asking those questions. And then invest in changes to help support early education. You can, you know, support organizations like First Up, and of course I'll pitch our own organization that works to educate people and strengthen the advocacy work around issues that improve the wealth and economic security of women. So those are concrete things you can do, and I hope you will take what you learned to do and take action, because this is a movement. It's a movement that we need to keep going and keep moving forward if we want to have a country that's inclusive and where all women and families thrive. And then, just so you know, this is the first of a series of gender wealth gap education forums. And the next one's going to be investing in women-owned businesses, which is kind of related to this because most of them are women-owned businesses, but yet less than 3% of venture capital goes to women-owned businesses, and women of color-owned businesses get less than 1%. So we're going to be talking about how do we move capital to support women-owned businesses. And then we're going to be going with Black women in healthcare, centering the voices of lived experience experts, strengthening financial capability of women. But we'll have these on our website. And I hopefully you will join for at the next one in January around investing in women-owned businesses. But for now, I just want to say thank you for coming, spending your hour. I really treasure everyone's time because I know people are busy. And I ask that you continue to join this movement and take what you learn and put it into action. We need you, and we can create change if we all take action. So again, thank you, Shannon, Carol, Sophia. It's been an honor listening to you and learning from you. And I wish you well, stay well, and good night.